So here's the scenario. You're on a vacation. Maybe it's a quick trip. Maybe it's for work. And you find yourself in this new city that just it hits differently. You've had the best meal of your life. The people seem a little cooler. The air feels just different. It's like you're suddenly lighter, more you somehow. So you're sitting there and just soaking it all in, the sounds, the pace, the possibilities, when 5 words just crash into your brain and instantly send you into a mini spiral. Could I actually move here? If you've ever had that thought, that what if moment that just kind of spirals into these Zillow searches and just romanticizing this new life that you could have, stay and hang out a while because I'm going to hold your sweet baby angel hand through the truth of moving to a new city, the emotional highs, the hidden challenges, what to really think about before you decide to pack up and start over, and some very simple ways to figure out if you're doing this to truly embrace change or trying to make an excuse to run away from your current reality, because that's a thing too. Cue the intro.
Hey there, I'm Melody Bose, your host of Jeans with a Blazer, a podcast about rewriting the rules of work and life.
Okay, so how many of you have been here before? Like, I need to know. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave me a comment, or if you're listening to this, send me a DM at Jeans with a Blazer, because I want to know the city that made you feel that way. I'm so curious. But I think in some way we can all relate to this, and some of us have made that move, myself included. I moved from Florida to California a few years ago, and there was so much that I didn't know and I didn't expect in the whole process. And I'm not saying I have all the answers or that there's even a right answer. If you're thinking about moving to a new place, you'll decide if that's for you. I just wish I had someone who just kind of laid out the facts and realness to help me reflect and prepare for all the changes and challenges for what lied ahead. So this is just more of an honest and sincere heart-to-heart with someone who's been there, so you can think through things before you decide to commit to a really big life-changing decision. So my goal here is to help you feel more clear and empowered, whether you decide to stay put and just deepen your roots where you are, or take that leap and embrace that new adventure. All right, so if you're thinking about moving, there is so much to be excited about, like opportunities and community and expanding your career, yeah, but there's also less Instagrammable realities around things like finances, loneliness, and growth. So before I get into all of that, I want to talk about that sudden ache to just spontaneously pick up and move somewhere else. Like, where does that come from? So there's something I like to call the allure of the fresh start. And for this, I blame Hollywood a little bit. So if you've seen movies like The Devil Wears Prada and Sweet Home Alabama, where the strong female lead just moves from her humble small town to live their best lives in a big city with bright lights and blah, 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 it creates this idea where we can hit refresh so that we can create the life we've always wanted simply by moving to a new place. Movies make it seem pretty glamorous and romantic, save for a few like character arcs and things that go horribly wrong along the way. But for lack of a better word, it seems like a very aspirational reality. And as someone who grew up in a very small, quiet town with not a whole lot to do, I totally get the appeal. So if you've had that feeling in a city where you're like, all right, like I think I could do this, then the minute you're home, you're like looking around to see what you can sell or take with you and like looking up apartments in the neighborhood. You're one step closer to being that girl in the new city and just completely reinventing yourself. Because like, think about it, in a new city, nobody knows your history. You can shed old labels and be whoever you want from day one. If you've felt pigeonholed in your current town, like you're the quiet one, or you're the party girl, or the reliable employee that never takes risks, a new environment offers freedom to break out of that. Psychologically, there's also a concept for this called the new chapter energy, or the fresh start effect. Research shows that at certain landmark moments, such as a birthday, New Year's, or even, yes, moving to a new zip code, we feel extra motivated to pursue our goals and act more in line with our ideal selves. A new city can serve as that kind of temporal landmark, a bright line between old me and new me. And it's no wonder that move feels so promising when you're craving change so much. So I'm not here to deflate those dreams, because sometimes, yes, a move is that launching pad into something bigger and starting a new chapter in your life. But there's also something about the allure of the fresh start that movies and TV don't really go into. I'll give you an example. The other day, I was catching up with a friend who lives in a completely different state, that she was born and raised there, her family's there, her whole community is there. And she was telling me about her recent trip that she took to New York. And she was just gushing about it. She was like, I'm so sick of this town and I want to change. I need a change. And I just want to start over in New York and just maybe pursue a different career. At first, I was like, okay, girl, like pop off, do it. Like go live your best life wherever you want to. But then as we continued our conversation, she shared a few more things that just kind of raised some red flags for me, saying things like, everyone there just seems happier. And I feel like if I lived there, I'd be relaxed all the time. And I just need to get away from this place. Just every corner reminds me just how stuck I feel. And we talked about this, don't worry, because I'm not going to leave my girl hanging. But this made me pause because I realized that her wanting to move had nothing to do with what she wanted to pursue, but in fact, it was motivated by a desire to escape. Now, it's one thing to have a curious mindset and desire for growth, but when it's more about avoidance than adventure, that's where things get tricky. The truth is, as shiny and new as a city is at first, eventually the novelty wears off. By year 2 or 3, that cute coffee shop where you grab a quick latte before work, you might still really love it, but it does just kind of blend into your background. And there's also things that you might find that you don't love, like more traffic or cultural quirks that maybe didn't faze you when you were just visiting because you didn't have to live with them. My friends, I don't say this to discourage you. No. I say it to help you to go in with open eyes, because if you're dreaming of a move because you think it'll magically fix everything, it's worth taking a pause here. There's actually a saying here, and I know I'm going to sound like, a Hobby Lobby sign, but it says, everywhere you go, that's where you are. That quote has stuck with me because it's true. If you're unhappy or feeling broken in some way, a new environment might distract you for a while. You'll be busy unpacking and exploring and meeting new people, but eventually those underlying feelings will resurface if you haven't dealt with them. Therapists even have a term for chasing happiness via relocation called the geographic cure. The idea is that you pick up and move, hoping your problems won't follow. But eventually, like I said, after that initial high, life normalizes and you realize the anxiety, the insecurity, the whatever it is that you felt has unpacked itself in your new place right along with your dishes. But let's also look at the other side of that, because moving can absolutely be transformative. So sometimes a change of scenery really does help break old habits and spark growth. We have to be honest with ourselves about why we want to move. I want you to ask yourself that question. Am I running towards something or running away from something? And there's no shame in either, by the way. A little of both is, sometimes involved, but understanding your primary motivation will help you address the right issue. If you're running toward new opportunities, great. You can chase those with intention. If you suspect you're mostly running away from a relationship conflict, a family expectation, a personal rut, recognize that those things might need attention whether or not you move. Here's a little practice to help you face that reality if you're moving to escape something or run towards something. I know I'm going to sound total yogi here, but just stay with me. I want you to take a moment to visualize both scenarios. What are you hoping to find in a new city, and what are you hoping to leave behind? Make a list, write it down. It can be in your notes, whatever. And seeing that on paper or your notes might reveal, for example, that I want a vibrant creative community and more career options. Is at the top of your list. Awesome. We'll talk about that in a minute. But maybe you also write, I'm so sick of feeling like a failure here. If that is the case, remember that changing cities won't automatically erase self-doubt. You might need to work on that internally or with a therapist or a counselor or someone through that personal growth, or else it'll follow you to Seattle or LA or Austin or wherever. I'll give you a personal anecdote too. For me, my dream city wasn't even a city at first. It was the whole state of California. I had visited my best friend who lived outside of the San Francisco Bay Area a few times when I was a teenager, and it was so different from where I grew up in my sleepy little beach town in Florida, just in every way possible. And then a few years later, I visited Southern California and I was like, oh, like this is it. And, it had the ocean and the great weather that I loved about Florida, minus the humidity. And it just had these kind of creative, aspirational energy that I just wanted to thrive in. So fast forward a bit to the time to right before I just moved, I was living in downtown Orlando in Florida, which I had moved to start my life in a city, but it still felt somewhat small. Like Orlando, the downtown area is somewhat relatively a small city. It's grown in a few years, but at the time it felt small and I just wanted more. I'm also really into yoga and had a strong community there that was really difficult to leave, so I knew I wasn't running away from something. All of that told me that I wanted to move for the right reasons. All right, so now that I've just kind of ripped off the band-aid behind the itch behind why we want to move, I want to talk a little bit about the considerations for if we do decide to move, what awaits us there, and its real impacts on your career, finances, sense of security, just life in general. Okay, so let's say you are leaning towards making a move. One of the biggest factors, maybe the biggest for many of us, is work and money. Especially for those of us who are professionals or creatives, the city we live in can either open doors or feel like it's holding us back. Let's do the hardest part first. Let's unpack the career considerations and the financial reality. So first, career opportunities. Does your field thrive in the city that you're eyeing? For example, if you're a filmmaker moving to Los Angeles or Atlanta, that might put you closer to where the action is. If you're in fashion or publishing, New York might be on your radar. Sometimes relocation can absolutely expand your opportunities. You might have access to bigger companies and more networking events, or just be surrounded by people who inspire you. Being in the right environment can catalyze your career growth. Yes, absolutely. I know friends who moved to pursue opportunities that didn't exist in smaller or more rural hometowns, and it paid off for them. They found these mentors and career paths that they never would have otherwise. However, and this is a big however, you have to be honest with yourself and make sure that that leap is worth it, because times have changed. COVID especially changed a lot of things too, because if you're a filmmaker or a content creator, that's not as location dependent as it used to be. We have channels like YouTube and TikTok that we can use to put our creative work out and even monetize on our own. You can be a freelance designer or editor or writer and work anywhere where there's an internet connection. So make sure that leap is worth it. In fact, career coaches advise don't move just to run away from a mediocre job, move because you're running towards a truly better job or career climate. You will want to ask yourself, is there a job offer or at least a strong industry pull in that city? Or are you just hoping something will magically work out once you get there? And guys, it's okay if you don't have everything lined up. Life is an adventure, but do your research. So, sounds great, but how? Here's what you can do to kind of help figure that bit of it out. So, start applying to jobs or gigs in the new city in question before moving. And on your resume, put a fake address of that new city. I did this. I used my friend's address before I moved to California, because sometimes if a employer sees an address that's out of state, they might not even look at the resume because, there's relocation costs that they don't want to think about. And it's just easier to hire someone in their city. So when you start applying to those jobs, then you want to see if you get any bites. So after a couple months, if you get some interview requests or there's any kind of feedback and you see lots of openings in your field, that's encouraging. Now, if it's radio silence or maybe the field is ultra saturated, be honest about what that means. That doesn't have to completely throw it off the table, but again, just the more data you have, the better informed you can make a decision. Now, on to money and costs of living. Ooh, money and cost of living is the not so glamorous side of this coin, and we have to talk about this friend to friend. I will not do you dirty by skipping over this, because nothing will crush your exciting fresh start faster than realizing you're constantly stressed out about rent or expenses in this new city, especially if you're moving to a higher cost of living city. If you're going to just move into the mountains and just, raise goats, then good for you. you might just skip this section. So every city has a different price tag. Have you crunched those numbers? If you're moving from like a mid-sized city or town to a major metropolitan area, be prepared that housing might be 2 or 3 times more expensive. But not only that, taxes could be higher, and groceries, even a drink at a bar, just might cost you more. And the way to figure this out, guys, Google is your friend. Do some research on the cost of living. Go to Reddit threads, ask Los Angeles, ask Seattle, ask Austin, and see what people are asking and talking about. See what the complaints are and the challenges. It's a really good way to get intel. Check out what the typical rent looks like for a place that has all of the space that you need. And don't forget to think about things like utilities and transportation. Like, do you have to get a car? Can you use public transportation? And any lifestyle costs, like will you be paying for parking, higher insurance, needing new clothes for a different climate? If I had decided to move to, I don't know, Chicago, cold weather to me is like 65 degrees, so I could not handle snow. And so all of this sounds really obvious, like, yeah, duh, but when you're wrapped up in the excitement, it's really easy to gloss over those details, and the truth, I promise you, is in those details. I have heard So many stories of people who moved to, say, New York or San Francisco with just a suitcase and $500 thinking that they would just figure it out, and reality hit hard. Yes, people do it in the movies. They move to a big city with a dream and a few dollars, but the stress of barely scraping by can sour your experience, and Hollywood just does not capture that. Also, guys, the whole process of moving is very expensive. There's moving trucks if you're taking stuff with you, shipping costs, security deposits on a new apartment. I started over from scratch. I moved with a backpack and a suitcase, gave away or sold all of my stuff, and I also had a job at the time that I could negotiate working remote, and I had an emergency fund that I could fall back on just in case. So if you're headed to a higher cost city without savings or a stable job, that ride can be a little rough. I'm not saying, again, you don't have to have everything 100% figured out, and you don't have to be financially secure. Life sometimes requires leaps of faith, but have a plan. If you can, save up a cushion fund for moving expenses and a few months of rent. The peace of mind will 100% be worth it, I promise. Let's say your current lease runs out in 6 months. Figure out how much that you'd need to save to close this current chapter and move onto your new one. Or if you'd have to sell your house, that could give you a little bit more financial flexibility and you can start planning your timeline from there. Also note that I'm saying all of this from the perspective of someone without kids. But you might have a partner that you're moving with or children. Of course, there's a bit more planning and preparation involved. But once you've decided as a family that you're going to do it and a timeline and plan for when, it's showtime. It's go time, baby. Just start the process of planning so you can start making decisions aligned with that direction. And beyond dollars, I also want you to think about the energy cost of starting your career and network over. You might be a well-connected professional in your current community with a solid reputation, but in a new city, you're somewhat anonymous. And that can be refreshing because there's no preconceived notions, but it also means you have to reestablish your credibility and relationships. Real talk, are you up for that hustle? If you're moving to pursue a particular job opportunity, then, there you have a built-in network of your new coworkers. If you're moving without a job, you'll need to double down on networking, reaching out on LinkedIn, attending industry events, maybe joining professional associations locally. That takes time and energy. And if you're craving a move because you feel exhausted or burned out at work, consider that the move will require a lot of that energy. And sometimes people will think that a new city will just automatically just reinvigorate their career, but you might face a period of unemployment or a lot of extra hustle that you need to put into it before things click. And if you're just not mentally prepared for that, that can just shake your confidence. There's also another emotional angle to this, the self-worth and success. If part of you is thinking, once I move to fancy city, I'll feel like I've made it. Be careful with placing your sense of success on a zip code. Sure, certain cities carry prestige in our culture, and there can be a real confidence boost by telling people like, I live in New York or I moved to London, especially if you come from a place where not many people leave. It's okay to be proud of taking on that adventure, but remember that success doesn't automatically flow the minute you land at JFK or LAX. You might actually struggle at first, and that can really eat up at your self-esteem if you expected this, instant glow up. And it can be so easy to move to a new city and feel like a failure when 6 months in, they're lonely and they don't have their dream job yet. They start wondering, did I make a mistake? Everyone back home thinks I'm living the dream, but I'm miserable. And that can mess with your head. We don't want that. Which leads me to my next point. So they say that the hardest part about moving isn't packing all of your stuff, it's rebuilding your people, your community. Which, yeah, okay, you can ship your furniture and clothes easily, but you can't ship over your lifelong friends, your family, or that barista who always knew your order. Moving to a new city can truly be an emotional roller coaster if you don't know anyone or you barely know anyone. So here's something very real that happens when you move. At first, you might be really swept up in all of the change. You're excited, you're busy settling in, but then inevitably there's that night. And people who've been there before know exactly what I'm talking about. It could be a few weeks in, it could be day 2. It's when you realize, I don't have any close friends here. Maybe you're scrolling your phone on a Friday night with no one to call or grab a drink with or see that new movie or go to that new place you wanted to try, and the city is just buzzing outside, but you feel invisible. And it can hit you like just a ton of bricks, just loneliness. I want to normalize this right now. because feeling alone or even isolated after a move is so common, more than people like to admit. Even the most exciting city in the world can feel lonely until you find your people. This was super hard for me, and I moved with my partner at the time, but the apartment would be empty while they were at work, and I was ordering the furniture bit by bit, so the whole place felt like a shell for a while. And nothing feels more empty and isolated and just cold than just like an empty apartment with no like soft couches or just a bed to curl up in. It feels so cold and just like not like a home yet. And all you want throughout all this change is just some sense of comfort and familiarity. And that's all been uprooted. So there will be nights that you question your decision. You will probably cry, and it will have moments that suck, but you just have to remind yourself that this part is temporary. I'd have those moments where I would check in with myself, and here's how I knew that even though in that very moment when things were really hard, I would ask myself, even though this feels scary and difficult, does being here make me feel expansive? Not expensive, expansive. Or does it make me feel stifled? Each time, my gut always told me I feel expansive. Scared? Yeah, absolutely. But I felt like I also had it in me to take up that space. And if I could control Alt Delete and just go back and reverse this, I knew I would feel stifled in my old chapter. So you have to trust that. And I promise you that feeling will eventually pass, but it takes time. I'd give yourself grace for an entire year to adjust. That's a long time. It feels like a long time, but time goes by anyway, right? But then I'd also give yourself another 6 months to maybe a whole year after that to truly feel like this place has become your home. Moving is really hard, guys. I feel like no one talks about that. They only talk about the adventure and fun side, but they never talk about the hard parts. So yeah, it's hard. Now let's talk about making friends as an adult. When you move somewhere new and you're, say, 30, you're not in school, maybe working remotely or in a small company, you have to actively create opportunities to meet people. And it might mean going to meetups or joining a class or club or introducing yourself to neighbors or coworkers and saying yes to invitations that you might normally skip. But it requires putting yourself out there, which can be exhausting and scary. And you might have to tolerate some awkward small talk or even rejection. You might exchange numbers with someone who you think could be a friend and then never hear from them again. It can feel like dating, honestly. And emotionally, you might have nights where you wonder, like, I feel so incredibly alone tonight. Is this normal? I assure you, it is. Friendships take time to form, and some research says it takes dozens of hours of interactions to develop a true friendship. You will get there, but it won't be instant, so you can't have those expectations. You might run into your future bestie just at a coffee shop. You might just run into them, and they might be your future bridesmaid mingling with, your other BFFs and stuff. But don't hold yourself to that, because that expectation, like, you don't want to create this scene that just might not necessarily happen right away. I remember when I moved, I had a weekend where the only new person I had met was this acquaintance that I met like 2 weeks prior, and we weren't close at all. And I ended up going to like a museum alone that day, and I actually had a really good time. But I felt this pang when I saw, groups of friends laughing together, like if you've seen Sex and the City and Carrie, where she is, in Paris or whatever. And she sees a group of friends and it reminds her of her friends in New York City. It's very much like that. You just feel left out in this kind of new space. Even though you might be enjoying your time alone, it might feel like you're forcing it a little bit. And for sure, I was so jealous. I missed belonging to a group. I had such a good group in Orlando, and it was just so hard to kind of be in this space where no one knew me, I didn't know anyone. So if you go through that, give yourself grace. It's not because you're not cool or something's wrong with you. It's a part of starting over. And you can and absolutely should lean on your support system where you moved from. Like, FaceTime and social media is your friend in this case, but don't use it as a crutch to prevent yourself from meeting new people. I moved to California in June of 2019. We all know what happened in 2020, and I felt so isolated and desperate for connection. I remember I joined a Facebook group, and I actually met one of my best friends to this day. We're still best friends, and she doesn't even live in LA anymore. But I was just so happy to have that connection, and it turned into something really real. Now, loneliness might sound awful, but there is an other side to that, and that is growth through solitude. This is so important because being on your own in a new place, even if you have a partner, it doesn't matter. It can be a period of incredible self-growth, but you have to approach it with the right mindset. There's research backing this up. Basically, when we learn to see alone time as a positive thing, it becomes an opportunity for creativity, self-reflection, and emotional change. In fact, people who come to value solitude often find they're content and even more positive after spending time alone. Isn't that interesting? While you work on building connections, also know that it's okay, even empowering, to learn to enjoy your own company. You might discover a new independence and strength in yourself that you might not have seen before. Start by going to a coffee shop and just like enjoying a coffee and a pastry alone, and just nobody's looking at you, nobody cares, it doesn't matter. But just enjoy that just short 20-30 minutes and then go home, see how you feel, and then try it again. But each little solo adventure you conquer is a confidence boost. Even if you don't feel it right away at the time, you prove to yourself, yeah, I can do this. Maybe you find yourself journaling more, or you pick up a creative hobby because, hey, you have the space to fill your time in new ways. And in that way, solitude can also spark creativity. Many great artists and thinkers cite periods of loneliness or solitude as times when they did important inner work or had these creative breakthroughs. Of course, this doesn't sugarcoat loneliness. No, it can still hurt. We're social creatures. We need connection. So you do have to put an effort in making connections in a new city. And my advice from experience and from experts is to be patient but proactive. Like, don't expect friendships to fall into your lap, but show up regularly to places where your kind of people might be. It could be like a weekly yoga class or a volunteer group or a networking event, a church or community center, whatever fits you. And the key is regular, repeated action. So find that new routine and go there. It's called the mere exposure effect, that suggests that we tend to like people more as we see them often. One more tough bit. Okay. Friends and family that you left behind. So moving can strain even your existing relationships a bit, and you might find that some of your friends back home drift away. Not everyone will keep in touch, and it can hurt. I remember being surprised that certain people I thought I was close to basically disappeared once I wasn't around in person. And it's not always personal. Life just happens, and it's a two-way street, right? But just try not to let that make you cynical. Instead, recognize that a move is an opportunity to learn who your true lasting friends are. I still have a ton of friends that now live in all different cities, states, and even countries that I still talk with regularly, and they are my lifers and a huge part of my support system. Some relationships will withstand the distance. Those are the ones to treasure. Others will fade, but look at that as making space for new connections that fit who you're becoming now. So I've talked about a lot of the challenges and some good parts in there, but let's look at the gifts that moving to a new city can bring you. They say that every city mirrors back a different version of you, and I love that concept. It's so true, because in a way, moving is like stepping into a parallel universe version of your life where the you in this new city might have like a totally different daily rhythm. You might start dressing a bit differently to match the climate or local style. You might pick up new hobbies because the city offers, say, surfing or hiking or art museums that you didn't have before. A new city is a chance to rewrite your story a bit. Back home, maybe everyone remembers that one time that you dramatically quit your job or the awkward phase you went through. In a new place, no one's the wiser. You aren't boxed in by old expectations, and this can be incredibly freeing. However, one thing to remember, you don't actually need permission from a city to evolve. It might feel like moving gives you that permission slip, like I can be whoever I want here, but truthfully, you can reinvent yourself anywhere, okay? Even without moving. Sometimes we use a new location as an excuse or a catalyst when in reality we had the power all along. It's like Dorothy with her ruby slippers, that you had the ability to change or grow from the start, but maybe you needed the journey to see it. So yes, a new city can jumpstart change. Just know that if you decide not to move, it doesn't doom you to stay the same or grow where you are. A new job, a new social circle, new habits can all create that. And it might be a bit harder because people expect you to be a certain way, but it's doable and sometimes really inspiring for those who witness it. Like imagine just having that confidence that you decide to just completely change everything about your life and you're stepping into your whatever era, your I grow lemon trees and collect my own lemons era, and people are like, amazing, I want that. Or you start your own business and you start thriving and you're from a corporate career, whatever, it's cool. Now, identity wise, another interesting thing happens when you move. You might go through a bit of an identity crisis before you stabilize. So I remember feeling a little lost in my first few months where I'm like, oh, if I'm not Mel who, hangs out at the yoga studio and goes to my favorite coffee place in Orlando, my old routine, then who am I? You have to fill in that blank. And it's awesome. So there's a liminality here, and it's a fancy word for the in-between phase where you're not who you were, but you're not yet who you will be in this new environment. This in-between space can feel unsettling, but it's also where you can consciously choose aspects of your new identity, maybe break some old habits. You can maybe embrace a more spontaneous side or take on more responsibility to be a more adult, grown-up version of yourself. And a personal tip I have for this is in those early days, establish a few routines or places that feel specific to you, so that you don't completely lose your sense of self. Let's also talk about growth. So moving can spur huge personal growth because it challenges you in many ways, socially, professionally, emotionally. You have to adapt, which builds resilience. You confront a lot of fears, like fear of failure or fear of missing out, and each one you overcome is growth. A new city might also expose you to new perspectives. Maybe you'll meet people from backgrounds you didn't encounter before, or the local culture will widen your horizons. That's growth too, because your worldview expands. All right, so on to the last part of this. I'm going to walk you through some signs to help you realize whether you're ready to move or signs that you're just trying to escape from where you are. It's gut checking time. Let's do this. So how do you know if moving is the right move or if it's maybe a reaction to something else? Let's go over a few signs. So as I list these, I want you to really pay attention to how you react and what this makes you feel. And this is a no judgment zone. This is for you, yourself, and you. These are simply prompts for reflection to help you be honest with yourself. So you might be ready to move if you feel mostly grounded where you are, but curious about more. In other words, you're not in total chaos or running from devastation. You're standing on your own 2 feet, and from that stable place, you're exploring a new horizon. Next, you're not expecting the move to fix you. You have a sense that you'll have new challenges anywhere and you're prepared to face them, just in a new environment. You're moving for experience and growth, not because you believe all your problems will magically evaporate at the city limits. Next, you've done some inner work or are actively doing it. Maybe you've been working on your mental health or you've gained clarity on what you want from life and that's led you to this new path. You're not moving to escape doing that inner work. If anything, you feel like a new place will support the growth you're already pursuing and not be a substitute for it. Next, you feel a genuine pull towards the new city. So it excites you in that deep positive way. It's not just, an anywhere but here type of feeling, but that specific place lights you up for a reason. Maybe you've visited and it feels like home, or you're just drawn to the culture or the community there in a way that feels meaningful to you. Next, opportunities and intuition line up. So you might find that doors maybe are organically opening in the direction of a new city, even if everything is not lined up yet. Maybe you've been networking and you find a job opportunity, or maybe you have a couple good friends that live there and you have that kind of built-in community already. When external signs and your gut feeling are both saying, yes, I feel instantly like bigger and better and just more excited to be here, that's a pretty strong indicator. Now, on the other hand, here are some signs that you might be escaping or you're just not truly ready. Okay, see how you feel about this. So first, you're mainly hoping that a new city will numb or distract you. Let's be honest. Are you looking for a geographic anesthesia? If something really painful or uncomfortable is going on, like a breakup, a burnout, a family conflict, and your first thought is to flee. Next, you haven't fully tried to improve things where you are. For example, if you feel bored but you haven't explored all of your city's offerings or sought new hobbies, you're using it as an excuse to want to go somewhere else. Or maybe you just feel lonely but you haven't given yourself a chance to connect where you already do live. If there are stones that are unturned in your current situation, turning them first can be a wise first choice. And you might still move, you might still come to that conclusion, but you won't leave with regrets of, I didn't even try here. Next, you're avoiding specific issues. Maybe you're avoiding a hard conversation with someone or running from a mistake or generally just trying to hit the reset button on life without resolving anything. Remember that wherever you go, those unsolved issues will tag along in your suitcase. For example, if you have a pattern of getting into toxic jobs or toxic relationships, moving won't automatically teach you boundaries or change that pattern. You need to address why you end up in those jobs or relationships so you can recreate the scenario in a new way. Next is your fantasy of the new city is overly utopian. I saw Mad Men before I had ever been to New York City, and I thought, oh, like this is it. This is my place. New York sounds so cool and fun before I had ever been there. And I realized when I did visit, I realized it wasn't for me. It was this utopia that I had made up in my mind that just didn't live up to my expectations because I didn't really give it a fair or realistic shot. If you catch yourself thinking everything will be better when I'm in here, new place, that's a red flag. No place is a perfect paradise. Okay, if you're not acknowledging that the new city will have trade-offs and challenges, you might be setting yourself up for disappointment. Next, you feel desperate or panicky about leaving. So a little urgency can happen if you're unhappy, but if you're thinking about moving and that move feels like a panic decision, like I just need to get out of here right now, rather than making that compulsive choice, take a breath. Unless you're in actual danger or in a truly harmful situation, major life changes made in a panic mode can lead to really rash outcomes. So it's okay to want to get out. Just try to transition from panic to a plan. So after listing all of those out, how many of those ring a bell? Like, I know it's a lot. And honestly, real life isn't black and white. Like, you might have a foot in both the ready and escaping columns, and that's okay. The goal here is to encourage intentionality. If you decide to move, do it with open eyes and purpose. And if you decide not to move, at least for now, make that a conscious choice that you feel at peace with rather than something that you back into out of fear. And I also want to say, no one is 100% ready for change ever. And if you analyze too much, you might talk yourself out of a good thing. So use those signs as guidance and not as strict rules. Sometimes we have to leap and learn along the way, and the key is knowing why you're leaping. And I want to leave you with this, hopefully, reassurance. Both choices are brave. So uprooting your life and venturing into the unknown of a new city, that is inherently brave. It takes courage to start from scratch and chase a dream or even an inkling of something better. But do you know what else is brave? Choosing to stay and deepen your roots, even when there's a flashy escape that just calls your name. It takes a lot of courage to say, I'm going to fully bloom right here where I am, and to face your challenges head on without changing the backdrop. One path isn't better or more grown up than the other. They're just different kinds of bravery. For many of us, especially in our 20s and 30s, we feel this pressure to always be moving forward, and often we interpret that as literally moving somewhere new to level up. But forward movement can be internal too. Real wisdom is knowing which season you're in, whether that's the season of expansion outward or the season of digging in deeper where you are. So whether you're packing up all your stuff or you're deciding to give your town where you are another shot, I hope you feel just a little more at peace and just a little more understood after all this. And you're 1000% just not alone in these feelings. Thanks for hanging out.
That's a wrap on this episode of Jeans with a Blazer. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, a mindset shift, or just the push you needed, do me a favor. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Leave a review wherever you enjoy your podcasts. It helps more people find it, and it keeps these conversations going. And I love hearing from you. Follow at Jeans with a Blazer and tag me with your biggest takeaways, your latest wins, or just tell me what topics you want to hear about next. See you next time.